going back over the last 5 games, does Iowa do something, take care of the ball better than most opponents that you play, or is it the Iowa State not doing a good enough job to try to get takeaways?
Yeah, I think that's obviously been a glaring statistic, and when you look at our games that we played, and really if you look at our success in general or our failures in general, I think taking care of the football and creating takeaways, it's been a key to success. And, you hear me talk so many times about winning in the margins. And, I think that, especially when games are highly contested and, man, the score is close, it's that fundamental that seems to be glaring when you talk about a win or a loss. And, I think when you look back at this game in the last 5 games, you're right on. I mean, that statistic certainly is not in our favor, and I think it's been debilitating at times for us, from an offensive perspective of giving the ball away, and credit to them for taking it away, and our inability to get takeaways. Those have hurt us at times and have not allowed us to be our best.
In your mind, in your estimation, has that been the difference in some of those games? Because the last 3 or 4 have certainly gone down to one play.
Yeah, I don't know if that's been the difference, but that's certainly, I think, and again, not even just in this football game. I think if you just look at our success and failure, that has been a critical component. It's our ability to try to win the turnover margin has been huge over the course of our 6 years. I think from year 1, it's been our talking point of what gives us a chance that has nothing to do with talent to have success, and it's that fundamental. So, yes, I think that certainly plays a big key in the game, and it has played a big key in our success or failure.
This game last year was the first time Hunter had taken snaps in a competitive game. And I know after the game you said it was just as much about getting Brock a breather as anything. But when you think back, what had you seen from Hunter that made you feel comfortable putting him in a pretty high stakes, high leverage situation?
Well, I think, again, you look back at Hunter's growth and development. I think, you look back to his true freshman year, the COVID year, and man, towards the end of the season, got in some games. I think the Kansas State game, the Kansas game, and really played well. And I thought he carried that momentum into certainly last fall and his growth. And, it's Randy had asked the question, I think maybe even after the game on Saturday, is, man, why do you trust Hunter? And, you just have diligently watched him continue to grow. And, the quarterback position's always hard because there's only one guy that can go out there and play. And, I think Hunter was continuing to make great strides through last football season. So you felt really comfortable that, man, you had 2 guys that could play at really high level for your football team. And, I think that was, what Hunter even brought us in that game was a spark and kind of, man, steadied the ship for us during that football game. But, Hunter's one of those guys. He's just consistently growing, and that part is what I really like about him.
He told us after the game he kind of spent all last week waiting for the butterflies to come, and they never did. I mean, when you hear that, or what does that tell you about him?
Well, I think that says his preparation. We talk, especially a first game, and I think you'll get it again this game, a young team, and you're on the road in a hostile environment, rivalry game, and it's like, man, what stimulates you not to having your most success or playing to your full potential? It's either your ego, man, I think I'm really good, so my process isn't great throughout the week, or it's fear, right? And fear, once you get to the game and you said, man, I wish I would have done more. And the one thing about Hunter is you never see either of those. You see him diligently working at his craft. So when he's ready to play, I think he's very confident about his, what he's supposed to do, his reads, where he needs to go with the ball. And then I think the other thing is Hunter's extremely coachable. There's never been a sense of ego and entitlement from how he carries himself, his time, his energy, his work ethic, as good as we've had, and it's really fun to have. And again, I think, so much pride in what he does and how he goes about his process is huge for him.
It's not very often that we go into a game where you could throw out the punter as being perhaps the best player on the field for both teams. What do you guys have to do to mitigate the impact that he can make on the football game?
Man, yeah, I think that's consistently something that we got to continue to have a great plan for. I mean, he's an outstanding player. I mean, you talk about the ability to change field position, the ability, and I think sometimes the credit just goes to him. He is a great player. They're also really good in their coverage units. They also have 10 other guys that do a great job around him. So, I think from our end of it is, we're going to have a great plan for him and a great plan of attack. And at times we thought we had that last year, and at times that didn't show up when we needed to. But again, a huge credit to him. Great talent, and it'll be a great challenge for us.
When you have a number of veterans like Orion, Anthony, how much does that help going into a rivalry game like this with so many newcomers that we saw start to make an impact in week one?
Well, I think every obstacle that comes in your way, when you have somebody that's gone through the obstacle or understands the obstacle in front of them, the more that understand it and that can give them knowledge and feedback, I think the better you're going to have clarity of what you're getting into. And, we're fortunate to have that good mix. I think every position group's got that, everybody in our program. And, I think we've recruited really well in this, in this area to understand what this game means to the schools and the communities and obviously that aspect of it. But then to have guys that have played in it, guys that have been in the fire, have seen, plays that have been successful, have seen plays that have not been successful. And it's like, man, how do we continue to grow forward? You lean on veteran leadership. So I think it is huge to have those guys in our program.
And Jake Remsburg, Cartevius Norton, anybody else, how are they looking?
Yeah, I still think Jake is, an option right now for this game. I think we'll see what Tuesday and Wednesday look like. He'll be on the practice field, so I think that's a huge positive. Will he play? It'll be, I think I can answer that question on Thursday. And, Cartevius, I would say, is doubtful. I don't know if we'll even get him to practice this week, so I'd say right now as we go into the week, he'll be doubtful. Yeah, I think his injury is just a leg injury. I don't think it's anything extended. My hope is that, it's 1 to 2 weeks is what we would have him out for.
When you look at the snap counts at one of the guard spots, Darryl didn't play as many as the rest of the starters, and then Zach Ross played a little more than some of the backups. What are you looking at there? Is that like an open competition now?
No, I don't see that. We have great faith in Darryl. I think the biggest thing for us is, Darryl was even last season, played through some injuries, really trying to get him back to full tilt. And Zach Ross has had a great offseason. I mean, he's been phenomenal. And so, I think for us, just trying to be able to keep our guys fresh and create some rotation. But, boy, I don't think we could have any more trust in Darryl Simmons and what he's done for us. And, again, I think it's a little bit of a positive for us. Man, Zach's had such a great offseason, had a great camp, and, the ability to keep some of those guys fresh in the interior of our offensive line.
And then it's safety with Travion, with Malik. What's their status going in? And then after you looked at, you rotated a lot of guys through at safety. How did all those guys kind of grade out in that opener?
Well, every one of those guys graded out, which was huge, and I think that tells you, I know we are really excited about that young group there. And, for Trey not to play, who, Travion was probably the guy that maybe had as good a camp as anybody. He got dinged up 2 weeks left at camp. I think he is certainly available for this game this week, which is great for us. And then Malik, I think, again, Malik is one of those guys. Malik will be back to full strength, dressed out for the game. We just made a game time decision not to play him in the game on Saturday because he was coming back from an injury from camp. But, I think both those guys being back in the mix as well, I think we feel very confident about where that group is. It was great to get those young guys out there. I think some of those guys played really great for us and, for their first action, physical football game. I thought those guys did a great job, especially tackling in space.
Matt, when you consider the streak that this program's on against Iowa, has your hunger level changed maybe from the early years to now to really increasing your obviously desire and maybe passion to win this game?
No, because I think we have the same passion for every game we try to play. I mean, at the end of the day, we've tried to win every single game we played here. And, I think for us, we understand, obviously, this is a great rivalry. It's great for our state. It's great for the communities, the alumni of both schools, and man, it's a great game. And we're playing a team that certainly, not only just as a team but as a program, has had great success. So, from our end, you love playing in these games. You love being a part of it. You love coaching in it, and what a great challenge to see where we are as a 2022 football team, and it'll be a great challenge, obviously, playing on the road in their environment.
And then the other thing I wanted to ask is just your impression on Iowa's offense and maybe how you stack up against them.
Yeah, I think it's so hard to tell. They had so many guys out, last week, some great receivers that have been great players for them. We got a lot of respect for their quarterback. We got a lot of respect for, the offensive line. I think their growth from last year to where they are now has been tremendous. And so, I think from our end of it, again, first games are first games, so it's really hard to evaluate, especially when you have so many guys out. But, I think there's a lot of impressive pieces of that, and, we'll have to play really well on defense to be successful in the game.
Has there been anything particularly difficult about playing at Kinnick Stadium in your time here? Because I think that in your 2 games, you guys haven't even scored a touchdown there yet.
Yeah, well, good. That's a good stat to know. I think from our end, obviously it's a uniquely challenging place just because it's a great environment. I think very similar to what we have here. Again, it says about the loyalty of the fan bases in this state. Great environment to play in because, man, they love their team, and it's, I think, very the same thing you get when you come to Jack Trice Stadium.
Can you talk a little bit about and describe the connection between Hunter and Xavier Hutchinson, especially with how much is on the line for this game?
I don't, their connection, I think, is huge. And I think from my end of it, whether it's the game, not the game, I think it's every day in practice. What I love about those two elite competitors, and again, I go back to some questions about both of those guys' characters. What makes both of those guys special is who you got to see on Saturday and who you've seen from Xavier for the last 2 years. They're the same guy on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday practice. And so, when some of your best and most talented players are the hardest workers and the guys that consistently come to work to perfect their craft, I think those things are really positive for a football program and a football team. And, obviously, if our team wants to continue to grow and have success, we'll need both of those guys to be their very best.
Are you worried that Xavier's going to have stronger coverage, and what are you going to do with the rest of?
Yeah, I don't know. I think from our end, we'll expect a really talented defense. So, you're going to get in our efficiency across the board, whether it's at receiver, quarterback, offensive line. We'll certainly have to be improved and continue to improve it, but another great challenge for us.
Yeah, you mentioned how much this game means to the fan bases and the communities. But in your opinion, what makes this rivalry so special?
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to the question about the fan bases. I think, for me, one of the great joys of being in this state now going on our 7th year is, the energy and the commitment and the excitement in the fan bases and the communities. It makes it really special. And, you see and you watch our teams travel to bowl games. You watch, the stadiums each Saturday when each team plays at home. I think there's a great loyalty and a great sense of pride. And those things are great. That's what makes games like this special, no matter what the sport, what the season, what the stadium or what the environment. They show up and they care and they're passionate. And that part makes it really special to be certainly here, but also makes it really special to be involved with a game like this.
I guess we haven't talked about Jirel, but what was about him you liked on the film once you
Yeah, Randy, I thought just how he ran. I thought he was electric at times on Saturday, and I just felt his efficiency in the running game. I thought all of his runs were extremely efficient. I thought there was great power, there was great vision. Jirel's at his best when he's got the ability to make one cut and get vertical, and really did some great things throughout the game that way. But I really thought he was efficient, no wasted runs, and really did a great job. And then his blocking and pass catching, all really positive throughout the football game. As I said on, before the season started, a complete tailback, and he looked like it on Saturday.
You mentioned on Saturday, historically, you guys have not played great football. I can't remember exactly what you said, in September.
Yeah.
When you look at the 5 games against Iowa, when you evaluate it, do you feel like you guys are not playing great football in those games, or is it just not winning that particular game, or how do you look at that?
Well, I think, as a collective whole, we've evaluated ourselves over the course of the last couple of years. And, I think part of our program, the initial part is, man, we wanted to believe we can be successful here at Iowa State, and I think we figured that out. Then we wanted to figure out, man, how do you get to November and play for a championship here, and I think we've been able to figure that out. And then I think the next part was, it's like, man, you get 12 guaranteed games to you. How do we maximize the ability to be our best in those 12 guaranteed opportunities? And, I'd be lying to say we've been at our best, in those 12 opportunities in the early part of our career here, and even through the course of the last couple of years. Now, I think there's been some uniqueness with COVID and some of those things, but, I still think that's an area that we're striving to be our best at, to be our best in our 12 guaranteed opportunities. And, I think for whatever reason, and I think you can debate those across the board, but, the one positive for us, it was great to get off to a great start last week. I thought that's the most efficiently from a fundamental and technical standpoint, not even what the score was or anything like that, just how do you win football games. I thought we were as sound as we've been at the early part of the season, so I think that part's positive.
You guys probably look at cover. If you play 4 games in September, it's those 4 games, but I think from the outside, you're probably judged on this game. Is September successful based on this game? Do you feel like that?
Yeah, I mean, I get that. I still think, to me, and I've said this a million times, I look at the success or failure of any, whether it's even getting off to a good start or it's the end of the season. Like, at the end of the day, we're going to judge it by who you are at the end of the football season. And, what have you done? Did you reach your full potential? Obviously this is something that matters, and it matters a great deal to everybody involved. And, but it's also, the next opportunity, especially when you look at this year's team, it's like, man, what a growth opportunity. Great team, great challenge, great environment. How do you stack up, and where are you right now? And so I think all those things, to me, is I look at it more from an individual basis and where we are in the current part of the season and trying to get where we would like to be at the end of the season. But I'm also not naive enough to sit here and say, hey, does this game not mean anything? Or, man, what importance does it have? It means a great deal, and I get it, and I understand it. And I also understand it's just part of the process of who we're becoming as a football team as well.
I think maybe the only time in one of these games where you guys could walk away and feel like your offense did more than enough to win was maybe that 2017 team. What was it about that offense that allowed you guys to have success against their defense that maybe you haven't been able to replicate in the years since?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, you look back at that game, is we took care of the football. I think that part was really big, and when you look at that game in particular, the ball security in that football game was big. And obviously there was, some other efficiencies throughout the game, but I thought that when you look back just statistically at one thing that was really important, that piece was really important in that game.
Thank you, Coach.
All right, guys, thank you.